My name is Brody Kaufman. I'm a brewer here at OHSO Brewery, and I'm the barrel program manager. So we take ingredients from raw ingredients and put them through the process of the hot side of brewing all the way through fermentation and then packaging and then inevitably into the hands of our consumers. From grain to glass, from conception to consumption, we basically just handle the entire process here. One of the things we specialize in here at OHSO is barrel-aged beers, both clean and wild. Clean beers include barrel-aged stouts, barley wines, wheat heavies. We also do wild beers, so those are going to be American wild ales, barrel fermented, inoculated with wild bacteria and wild yeast cultures. They age in barrels for a long time, go through a biotransformation fermentation process that creates sour beer in a traditional kind of Belgian-esque old world type of way. In a nutshell, those are the things I do here for OHSO. To me, beer starts as an idea. For other people, their process might be different, but for us, we're kind of an idea-driven brewery. OHSO as a company, we have 3 functioning brew houses. One of them specializes in more of our production side, brewing our core beers or our flagship beers that are kind of around all the time. Then our other brew house in Arcadia, it specializes in nano brews, so involving the community and doing small batches in kind of an informative way for people to learn and get involved. And then here, we're kind of in the middle as far as size-wise. We specialize in seasonals, one-offs, all the crazy stuff, and we're just kind of here to go wild and let our imaginations run wild. We kind of start with ideas. We have the concept in mind. Typically, sometimes it could be from a name. We have a thread in our Slack channel that's just for beer names. And one of our recently promoted brewers, he's like, I think we should make a beer called Crannable Nectar, and it should be a cranberry nectarine sour. And so that name started the process. And from there, we said, okay, so how are we going to execute a cranberry nectarine beer? Because those ingredients haven't traditionally been used together a lot, especially cranberries, because they're kind of drying and not necessarily the most palatable flavor that comes to mind. But so we kind of start from the name and build the idea around the name. What type of beer is it going to be? How are we going to execute creating that type of beer? And then how are we going to introduce those flavors that we want into that beer in a way that's going to come through in the final product? A lot of the things we do here kind of start from a concept, start from an idea, start from a name, start from a flavor profile that we saw at a local restaurant. It could be culinary influences, cultural influences, it could be kind of anything. We take influences from everywhere, local influences, and we just try to kind of create products around those ideas and then execute them the best we can to create the best product for our customers. Today we're brewing a wet hop IPA, which is kind of a special beer for us, kind of a passion project as a brewer because it's not the most efficient process for us. We're using hundreds of pounds of raw hops that have been harvested and overnight transported from the Pacific Northwest down to the Southwest, thousands of miles. The cost is high, the loss is high because there's so much more matter involved that absorbs liquid, so our yields go down. But to say that we did that beer is kind of just something we take pride in and doing it well, and our customers really enjoy it's called So Fresh and So Green. I'm a big Outcast fan, and like I said, we take influence from anywhere we can find it. So Fresh and So Green, it's a wet hop IPA. These hops that are literally arriving right now into our door were picked yesterday, overnight flown down to Arizona for us to use today within 24 hours, literally within less than 20, probably 18 hours from harvest to actually going into our batch of beer. So hops are typically processed into a pellet. Pellets are much more friendly for brewers to use. They're concentrated. They kind of isolate the compounds and the flavors that we want in beer and get rid of a lot of the vegetal matter, the leafy parts of the hops that are really not contributing flavors to the beer. So they create a more concentrated version for us that also are more shelf stable. They can be stored for a few years typically and still have a good flavor, whereas these fresh hops, if we weren't to use them within 24 hours, would lose a majority of the flavor compounds that we're looking for out of them. Typically hops are used in much smaller amounts. A typical batch of beer on the hot side, which we're brewing today, might use in an IPA somewhere around 20 pounds of hops total, and today we're going to be throwing 200 pounds of hops into this batch of beer in their raw form. We make beer the same way everybody makes beer. We have the 4 basic ingredients, which are malt, water, hops, and yeast. With a few exceptions, every beer uses those 4 ingredients. There are some crazy styles and some weird sours that might substitute herbs and spices for the hops, which is before they used hops in the New World, they used herbs and spices in like a gruit type beer. Hops are actually a microbial, preventative, naturally ingredient. They inhibit the growth of bacteria and wild yeast, which in 99% of beers you would never want. But in certain wild sour ales, which are some of the ones we produce here, those compounds will actually get in the way of those cultures developing and flourishing. Besides those few examples, every beer is made from those 4 ingredients. Places like Germany with the Reinheitsgebot, which is the German purity laws, even to this day, those are the only 4 ingredients that are allowed to go into a beer. So when you think German beers, you think very traditionally sound styles because they have to focus on those ingredients exclusively. They can't throw in bananas or like some weird, fruit puree or whatever it is. People are getting crazy these days, especially in America. All beers basically center around those 4 ingredients. From there, we kind of like to push the boundaries here at OHSO with what we can do to kind of expand and broaden what the definition of beer is to people. We just got back from Denver, where we won a Great American Beer Festival medal, which in our industry is one of the highest awards you can receive, for a beer that used jasmine rice as about half the grain bill instead of 100% traditional barley, and then it has ginger, lemongrass, and jasmine green tea added. So it's a really light, crisp beer, but in Germany that beer would be illegal effectively, but here we're allowed to kind of push the limits and introduce those flavors. And like that whole idea came from sitting at a sushi restaurant and eating foods with those flavors and being like, yeah, these flavors really go together well. I wonder like what type of beer we could create that incorporates those flavors and then is also enjoyable and palatable. And we came up with a rice lager, which also kind of ties into the whole, sushi style beer and the whole Japanese culture. Luckily, a beer that we all love when submitted to the competition won a silver medal. So that was pretty cool for us. Malt is typically malted barley, which is a grain that's harvested and then processed in a fashion that increases the amount of starch available for us to convert enzymatically into sugars. By initiating a germination process in the harvested barley, it begins to build reserves, expecting to sprout. And so they'll get it to the point of sprouting and then kiln it, which basically kills off any more continual growth, but also caramelizes the sugars and keeps them very, nutrient rich, which those starches then through our mashing process, we're able to convert to sugars and extract, which in the end become alcohol. Malt is referring to malted barley, but we also use different forms of malted and unmalted grains, wheat, rye, oats, and so forth. So, and like I said, rice even. Anything that we can use in a legal fashion to get sugar in the end is within our, strike zone. Through the milling process, those malted grains that are, kilned to different Lovibond levels, which in the end are going to dictate the color of the beer as well. So grain is essential in determining both color and alcohol in the final product. They can be kilned to different levels, which are going to increase the color or darken the beer, anywhere from a pretty wide scale where certain malts are as dark as dark roasted coffee. I mean, they're black, they're bitter. When you eat them, they turn to dust because they're so kilned and so roasted. And then to ones that are hardly kilned and they contribute a very light color, like a Pilsner or a light, American lager that's almost clear. Those are going to be the hardly modified malts. And so we, in establishing a grain bill, which is basically the combination of malts we're going to use in a specified beer, we usually base it on the style that we're going for, and then there's a range involved in that style of the end product color, and we make a combination of those malted grains that's going to get us within that style range for color. And then when it contributes to the alcohol, basically when we mill the grains, it cracks the husk exposing the starches that are inside of it, and also the husk then becomes basically a filter pad when we're running off the wort, which is the sugar tea extract, the water that's extracted, the sugars that will then go and become alcohol in the end.
Often called the mushroom of the gods, lion's mane has a long history of medicinal use. This popular nootropic has been shown to enhance focus and increase cognition, helping you feel more productive and accomplished. Research studies have also shown that lion's mane is neuroprotective, giving you peace of mind as you power through your day. Try lion's mane and experience the mental clarity and productivity boost you've been missing.
Those cracked grains are put into our mash tun with hot water, and at those temperatures they enact enzymes that convert starches to sugars. The water then absorbs those sugars, and we filter that liquid from the grain bed, which that liquid down the line becomes alcohol. First it goes through a boil process, which both concentrates the liquid by boiling water out of it, concentrating the density or the gravity or the sugars within that liquid. Also sterilizing the liquid, boiling it for an extended amount of time is going to kill off any wild microbes or wild yeast or bacteria that could be on the grains, which, if you know anything about fungus and bacteria, they're everywhere. You're breathing them in constantly. They're inside of your body, your stomach, they're all over your skin. So they're everywhere. So basically it creates a sterile liquid at that point, where from then on is basically doesn't see the light of day. It doesn't see the exterior environment once it's been sterilized for us. So we'll boil it, send it off to fermentation where it becomes alcohol. That's how the grain basically contributes to the beer. So after the hot side, which is the brew day, which they're doing behind me right now, that sterile liquid is sent upstairs. It's sent into a fermenter that's been cleaned, sanitized, purged of oxygen, so it's a nice sterile environment for it to be. We reintroduce oxygen at a level that's desired for fermentation. Yeast needs trace amounts of oxygen to have a healthy fermentation and grow to the density that we need it to be within the beverage to have a good fermentation. So we introduce oxygen back, but the yeast is also introduced at that time. We call knockout, so we're knocking it out of the kettle into the fermenter. Yeast is added. Sometimes nutrients are also added that help aid in a healthy fermentation. And then from there, the yeast begins to multiply. We initially add several billion cells of yeast to the beer, but it grows to a level that it feels comfortable. And then once it kind of gets to a stable level, begins to metabolize those sugars that we've created through the brewing process and turn them into alcohol. The yeast basically kind of eats sugar and farts alcohol. The single cell yeast organism is like the human body in a nutshell. It processes things, puts them through a process, takes what it needs, turns them to other things, and then excretes the things it doesn't need. So it metabolizes the sugars, turns them into alcohol, carbon dioxide gas, and also creates heat through that process. Upstairs during fermentation, all of our tanks are temperature controlled with a glycol system that basically through controllers kicks on and off through temp probes. When it gets to a certain temperature, opens up the jackets, allows it to cool back down to the desired fermentation temperature that we're going for on that given style, that given yeast strain, and basically allows that fermentation to happen at the rate that we want it. At a higher temperature, fermentation happens quicker and also starts to kick off flavors that we're not necessarily searching for, different esters, different phenolics. Certain styles you want those, like a traditional wheat beer is typically fermented a little bit warmer, because when you think of wheat beer, you think of banana and clove and those types of things, but those are technically considered off flavors in most styles. But in that style, it's on par for that style. So every style is fermented at a different temperature based on what you're going for. If you think about a lager, you think about clean, crisp flavors, they're fermented the coldest. That fermentation takes a little bit longer at those temperatures, but they also limits any of those estery, phenolic flavors that could get away from the profile we're going for with that style. And then ales kind of fall in the middle. Ales kind of have a little bit of a fruity flavor. If you think about an IPA, a lot of people contribute those tropical fruity flavors to hops, which they definitely impart a large part of those, but also different esters. Esters are a compound that exist in fruit as well, but they basically contribute fruit-like flavors. There's a variance in the temperature scale. Probably here we vary in about from 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. There's always exceptions in brewing. There are some styles that will ferment much hotter than that. I mean, if you want to talk about kettle souring, which is a whole nother ball game, those things flourish at higher temperatures, but for the most part, we're between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit in our fermentation. That yeast is happy and healthy, and it's doing what we want. It's creating the flavor compounds we desire, and it's hopefully, giving us a quality product that we can put out. Beer in barrels is kind of a whole nother realm of brewing and aging, really. It's considered as not always, but typically a secondary process when we're talking about clean beers, which are beers that the only organism acting on them for the most part predominantly is going to be Saccharomyces, which is traditional beer yeast. And then it goes into a barrel just to kind of age and condition. All the barrels we use, and almost everyone uses, are second use barrels. Out of that barrel, you're looking for a little bit of the character that the barrel contributes, tannins, vanillins, like different compounds that exist within the wood. The char contributes some flavor. Most spirit barrels are charred to an extent. So like bourbon, different dark rums. Most of those spirits go in clear, come out dark. So those barrels are going to contribute a lot of flavor and color. So we're looking for both a combination of the barrel and then whatever was aged in the barrel prior to the beer going into it. So whether it's a spirit, whether it's wine, we get maple syrup barrels where they're literally aging maple syrup in a barrel, and then we're taking it and putting a wee heavy and making a French toast inspired beer. You can buy hot sauce barrels, you can buy vanilla extract barrels. I mean, there's a lot of cool options out there, and they're only expanding as the kind of popularity grows. So beer goes in a barrel basically to continue to develop the complexity of that beer. It also helps to drive down the heat, we like to call it, or the kind of the alcohol presence. Those beers are typically really high alcohol, which getting to that point is another kind of process that's a little bit unique. But those high alcohol beers, they're too hot to really be enjoyable, but once they go through kind of a micro oxidation, extended aging, contributing more depth of flavor and character, they become a lot more palatable. That's kind of why you would age barrels in a nutshell. On the clean side, on a sour side, we're actually fermenting the beer in barrels. So it's not going into a fermenter first, it's going into a barrel. We're putting a mixed pitch of both yeast, wild yeast, and bacteria in there that kind of create a symbiosis, which they co-compete and ferment sugars to alcohols, to create acids, esters, all types of different complexities. And that environment with a little bit of oxygen that gets introduced naturally through the pores in the wood, and kind of a lot of different things allow for the best processes there. That's the cool thing about being a brewer is in working in a team of people. Like, I grew up playing competitive sports and playing on team sports, and honestly, working in a brewery is very similar. I draw parallels to it all the time. It's like, if you play on a basketball squad, you can't be the best rebounder, the best passer, the best shooter. I mean, you can, but it's pretty rare. You all have your roles within the team to be successful, and we all have our roles within the team. Some of us have more of a science mind, some of us have more of an artistic, mind. We all have some type of combination of both, and then we all kind of come together to play to our strengths and create products that are greater than the sum of its parts, which is awesome. It's one of the best parts of working in a brewery and working with great other brewers and really smart people, is that we have the opportunity to kind of create something that we could never create on our own, but through the sum of our parts, we create these products that we all contribute in some way to. Science, definitely fermentation, enzymatic processes that go into beers, all these things are very scientific. There are things you can study till your eyes bleed. I mean, you can never know everything about beer, but you can try, and you can try your entire life. There's people who strictly work on the science side in laboratories, in comprehensive studies of components of every ingredient that goes into beer. But then there's the artistic side as well. It's definitely one of the parts that I typically pride myself on, is bringing the artistic side to things, and the balance that we achieve through all of our strengths gives us a really cool kind of end product, basically. If you were to ask anyone that knows me outside of this industry, they would think that I'm crazy, because honestly, we work wild hours. You show up to work someday, it's not like I punch in at 9, I'm punch out at 5. If something happens in the brewery, it's our responsibility to handle it. And that could mean working a 12-hour day, a 14-hour day if it comes down to it, because you can't abandon your post. You have to make sure what happens, happens. Our work is pretty strenuous physically. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, I won't say they make it into the beer, but into the process. We literally pour our heart and soul and our bodies into these products, and from an outside perspective, minimal return. The cap you can make as a brewer is a lot lower than you can make in other industries, other corporate style positions. We're all very smart people. The smartest people I've ever met work in this industry. They're brewers, they're in there, and most people would think we're crazy because they see you and they say, why do you do what you do? You know, you don't get paid that much, your job is hard, you know, physically and mentally, and it puts you through the ringer, but we do it because at the end of the day, we get to create a product that makes people happy and brings people together. And the fruits of our labor literally creates happiness. Some of people's fondest memories are sitting around the table with your old man, sharing a beer, having those conversations after dinner, just talking. And beer kind of allows you to open up and explore parts of your psychological being that you might not otherwise unlock just through normal conversation. So we kind of create, it's almost like alchemy. We're taking these ingredients that you could hand to most people and they would have no idea what they do or what they become, and we create a product from conception to consumption, from grain to glass, whatever you want to call it, that makes people happy and brings people together. At the end of the day, I think that's where we all kind of hang our hat on. You know, at the end of the day, I can sit down and I can consume the product that I've worked on for weeks. How many people that work in insurance can do that? You know, how many people that work in logistics or crunch numbers and Excel sheets all day can really enjoy the fruits of their labor and really take pride in those and share them with people and watch people enjoy them. We'll be sitting there brewing and you just look out into our tap room and you see all these people having fun and enjoying themselves, and that's part of why I do what I do. It's also what I've done forever. I went to school for industrial engineering, and most of the people that go to school for engineering don't end up making beer. I can tell you that as a fact. I actually don't know anyone else that I went to school with that is making beer currently, in my degree, that is. I wasn't a fan of the corporate world. I never was. I didn't like that you didn't have the ability to be artistic and express yourself and like really have an impact on your industry and what you're doing every day. So after college, I went out and just tried to find a startup company that was looking for help. And a friend of a friend was starting a brewery. And he's like, you know, it's a brewery, he needs help, like go talk to him. And I did, and he gave me my first job. And your first job in the brewing industry, as anyone who works here knows, is never flashy. It's never the most fun job. It's typically doing the brunt of the work that's undesirable for most, you know. So mine was labeling bottles, building boxes. So we, you know, get them in flats, gluing them together, folding out 6-packs and running a bottling line and, you know, scooping out grain and doing all that stuff that we all do starting out. And, you know, I was making $500 a week when I first got into the industry, which you can't really survive on these days. So I had to work a second job, bartending on top of it just to make ends meet, working 60, 70 hours. And so from the beginning, it kind of set the tone that, like, if I'm going to do this, it's going to take hard work, and I'm going to have to, you know, sacrifice in some senses to get to where I want to be, which inevitably is to make an impact on this industry, make an impact on the world, make an impact and just make world-class beer that is respected throughout the brewing community. That kind of set the tone from there. I've been in the industry for 11 years. I'm 33 years old. For my age, not a lot of people have worked that long in the industry. I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, went to school in Iowa, college in Iowa. My first job was in Iowa, but brewing's taken me around the world, several continents and countries for brewing purposes, and inevitably a job that I found on a job posting board in Arizona for a barrel program manager brought me to Arizona, and I left everything that I ever knew. I left my family, I left my friends, I left my comfort zone, and moved to a place where I knew nobody just to pursue my passion in this industry and try to keep pushing the limits of what I can do with beer. And so I've been in Arizona for 4 years now, and that's how I'm here today.
With 10 different mushroom species packed into the most delicious gummies you've ever tried, this bottle has it all, including favorites like maitake, shiitake, lion's mane, reishi, and cordyceps. You'll experience a powerful blend of beneficial compounds that support healthy cognition and increased energy levels. These gummies are of the highest quality and efficacy, making them the perfect choice for anyone looking to perform at their best. Designed for a productive lifestyle, it's the easiest way to include all the benefits of mushrooms in your day.
It's a freedom that's allowed to us as Americans to make alcohol or beer specifically at home, so why not take advantage of that? I mean, for 20, 30, 40 bucks, you can make 5 gallons of beer in your house. And even if you have to dump the first few batches, there's a lot of obstacles as a home brewer that are unfortunate, especially from a sanitation perspective. Eventually, you have the ability to make beer at home that is drinkable, that brings your friends over to sit in the garage, and you can take an old refrigerator and turn it into a kegerator, and have beer at home. It's just a fun thing, and it's also a great hobby to have if you are, have a scientific mind, or even that kind of blend of art and science. It's a lot of fun to kind of create recipes at home, experiment with different things. There's an infinite amount of information available online in book form. Just the amount of resources is incredible. If you want to learn how to make beer and you have a desire to do so, you can do that for sure. I mean, I had no classical training in brewing, and how I learned was reading homebrew blogs and buying a ton of books and just reading them. And there's so much good literature out there that you could become an expert in your own home just from reading and trying things. And also, if you're interested in working in the brewing industry, and people ask me all the time, where do you start? Because there are traditional classic forms of education you can get. They're expanding. Every year people are adding brewing programs into their curriculums, but traditionally it's been pretty limited, and that people don't always have the resources to go spend tens of thousands of dollars on that type of education. Start brewing at home. Get to know the process at home, start to learn how it works, start to read the books, and then go into a brewery and apply in person and just say, hey, and they'll sit down and talk to you. And if you can kind of cite off a few things and exhibit that you understand what's happening, it's going to go a long ways. At the end of the day, a degree means nothing in this industry. My education was a huge waste of money. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I have endless experiences and countless memories, but at the end of the day, I could do what I do without a college education. The resources are there for everyone to learn and understand beer, so why not do it? Before Louis Pasteur invented all these modern sanitation techniques, beer was actually considered the safest thing because it creates a combination of both alcohol and pH. It's below a pH threshold where most harmful microorganisms can grow and flourish. So beer, as it ferments, the pH drops, and it gets to a level where those undesirables can't really compete. And then also alcohol is going to help deter those organisms as well. So the combination of lower pH and alcohol created a beverage that was considered safe to drink, which the water at those times, running through canals and wells and things weren't. Original styles, beers, the alcohol level was pretty low. Modern brewing techniques has really bumped up that to a higher level. It's also, the ingredients weren't as good back then, so it was hard to kind of get higher alcohols, but they would just put it through a fermentation process that made it safe to drink. You weigh your options, and beer makes you feel good and you have a good time too, so why not drink beer? I won't name names here, but if you give me a domestic light lager that's produced by a macro brewery, I probably want it as close to freezing as possible because I don't want to taste it. But if you give me a quality made beer, stylistically it's going to vary. Our barrel age offerings, our stouts, barley wines, we recommend people drink them close to 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which means pull it out of the fridge, let it sit, if it's in a can or bottle, for 30 minutes to an hour and just naturally warm up, and then that's when you crack it open. Those flavors are so complex, and there's such a depth of flavor there that when it's cold, it's just going to suppress those flavors. And so we want it to warm up and open up to you. Similar to a red wine would, even the process of letting it sit and kind of oxidize, and those flavors will start to transform and come out in different ways. And as you drink the beer, you'll notice different flavors at different times. Your palate adjusts to certain flavors. Bitterness sometimes immediately kind of overtakes your palate, but then 3 sips in, you start to taste other flavors as your palate adjusts. So stouts, barley wines, darker beers, we like to drink closer to 55 to 60 degrees. IPAs probably a little bit kind of, in the mid 40s, and then lagers are typically drank a little bit cooler, just because they have that desired clean, crisp flavor profile that at a colder temperature is going to come across better. So OHSO stands for Outrageous Homebrewers Social Outpost. Most people don't know that, and we typically don't tell people unless they ask. It's just OHSO at this point. The first location was on the canal, so it was and it's surrounded by, Arcadia is a really like neighborhood friendly part of Phoenix, and there's a lot of businesses kind of intermixed with neighborhoods, and it's got a really strong community. And so being on the canal, coming from Iowa, you go down a bike trail, there's a bar every 5 miles, but in Arizona it's a little less common to have bike trails and bars on them. So they were a place on the canal people could cruise over on their little cruiser bikes or longboards or whatever they want, and just kind of pull up. And they have a huge patio on the outside that overlooks Camelback Mountain, and it's honestly like a transcendental experience when you hit golden hour and you see the sun reflect off the mountain. It glows bright red, and the patio's facing back out there. So it was kind of born off of this kind of like neighborhood, bike friendly, dog friendly, family friendly, just all inclusive kind of place. And I really think that's why we continue to succeed today, is just everyone feels comfortable here, and everyone feels, you could come in yoga pants or you could come in a suit. You could come for your college graduation, or you could bring your dog to the groomer and stop by for a beer. It's a very kind of all-inclusive environment. The most unique thing is probably the culture that exists here, which is just a trickle down from the owners. We have 2 owners that are both incredible people, both in their own right. They're kind of the yin and yang, different business perspectives and different outreach perspectives. They treat their employees very well. And it doesn't matter if you're a brewer or you're a bartender or server. They just created this environment where people like enjoy coming to work. Coworkers become your friends, and end up hanging out outside of work. Front of house hangs out with back of house. Brewers hang out with it's just like such a collaborative environment. When you're a customer and you go into a place, people's energies are contagious. Every energy is contagious. Those energies rub off on people, and you see these people that they don't look like they hate their lives. They're having fun, they enjoy their job, and it's just it creates that perfect symbiosis of you can make a living, you can enjoy your work, you don't dread clocking in every day and count the minutes till you clock out. The ownership just from the beginning really created this environment that's great for employees, and that's kind of extended throughout the operation. I mean, we're constantly growing, we're constantly expanding. They even developed a program for long-term employees to actually get into their own ownership. So we have a separate concept called Little O's now, which they reward long-term employees with building them a taproom restaurant that they can over time purchase and become the proprietors of. Our industry, it's not known for the long-term benefits, the long-term kind of like, what do you do? Like, do you work till you die, or what's the plan here? So they recognize that as an issue, and they created a system to kind of counteract that. They're constantly thinking about other people. Another thing we do is we're extremely philanthropic. We donate, I don't know if it's an exaggeration, but I would almost say millions of dollars a year to charities, whether it's high schools, local schools. Every teacher in the greater Phoenix area gets a gift card every year to OHSO. We send employees out to all the schools. They drop off envelopes of gift cards, just with a note from our owner that says, a lot of times you're underappreciated, but we really appreciate what you do. Here's a $50 gift card. Stop by sometime and enjoy a beer and a burger or whatever you want on us.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoy our documentaries as much as we enjoy making them. Unfortunately, many of our videos don't earn enough YouTube revenue to afford the cost of production. But if you like our content, the best thing you can do is directly support it on Patreon. Plus, you'll get access to behind-the-scenes vlogs and commentary. If you're looking for something more in return, go to paragraphic.io, where you can buy our other products and services. Alternatively, you can shop our Amazon storefront for our favorite equipment recommendations. Also, check out Boca, where you can find beneficial supplements, ingredients to optimize your productivity. We especially love the lion's mane and mushroom gummies. And finally, consider signing up to Multitude, a platform built for long-form content, where you and other content creators can share and monetize new videos every week.